youth, like young youth, 8, 9, 10-year-old parents say, when should we be in the gym? Like, at what point do we start that? And usually I say something along the lines of like, like other sports I'd add in, or like just getting physical activity, something where they learn to move their body. Is there a general age or stage that you would consider starting
Yeah,
this?
so I mean, I don't like to turn away anybody, obviously, but I kind of set the rule, not the rule, but the general age that I kind of accept at least individual clients on, like, saying, I'm going to take your kid for an hour, right? And I'm going to
Right.
work, I'm going to keep their attention, right, during this, get
Half the
meaningful
battle.
work in for an hour, right? So I kind of set that age for those individual sessions at 12 or older. And even that's kind of stretching it for me. But at the same time, I do recognize that I can alter movements, and I don't need to put a barbell on a 12-year-old's back. I don't need that to teach them how to do a deep squat. But there's maybe be a 12-year-old that says like, hey, I want to learn like to squat well. And if they're motivated to do that, sure. Like I'll teach them
Yeah.
how to squat well, and I'll put like a sub-maximal load in their hand, like a kettlebell or a medicine ball. Maybe those are the things that I kind of adjust to make it more, again, this is a growing individual, like those ages 10 to 12. We're still growing. We're going to add size and mass to a body that in maybe 6 months or even a month, you see how these kids hit growth spurts, and they just,
Right.
now I'm like kind of creating these patterns, training these qualities, but then they grow, an exponential amount of inches. And now I'm having to reteach them how to explore their body. So that's where the age we kind of more explore movement patterns, and like we've talked about physical literacy. I don't know who threw that term out there before or originally, but I kind of do like it. It's, you know, I don't like to get on this pedestal or this soapbox, I guess you could say, of kids today just aren't doing all the things that we did to explore movement, right?
Right.
Like we were outside more often. We were jumping, climbing trees, like absorbing our body, playing tag, playing other sports, like for fun, like shooting baskets, and just this kind of, I don't want to get into this too heavily, but this over specialization or early specialization of kids that still are just learning how to move. Can kind of take away from those things. So if I were to accept someone of that age into the weight room, I would do things like more like crawling and jumping to absorb body weight, jumping over hurdles, obviously making it fun and motivating, because again, the at that age, I feel like, the attention of this is going to make you better for a goal that maybe you don't even have yet, or is just too kind of far into the future. um Exploring those things that will overall just help them be better performers and more competent movers, instead of focusing so heavily on, how it transfers to what they're doing in a sport in the moment.
Right. Right. I think that it's something that I think sometimes we get youth goalkeepers that are just so in love with the sport that they're like, I just wanted to be the best that I can at it. So that's where they're like, oh, I see the older people are doing this, and I know eventually I'm going to need it. So it's like a curiosity of like joining. But I like the part about adding these movements, the crawls, and that. And I've seen it be a really great addition because we've had you jump in on some of our like juniors plus and juniors elite programming. It's like our high school kids, yeah, we know the benefit. It's been great when you're in with them, but like to see it with the younger kids and them kind of getting into it, enjoying it. It's like a nice extended warm up more than it is like a targeted session, I'd say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's good because I think it gives us as coaches a really good idea too of where they're at in terms of their movement patterns. And oftentimes, honestly, it translates quite well. Like, okay, this person could look really athletic in what you had them doing, and they look really athletic when we went in the goal. And someone else struggled a little bit with their balance and coordination. Makes sense. They struggle with jobs or tasks that include a little more balance and coordination. So it's
Yeah.
cool to kind of see that crossover and how the two fields are not just relate, but are intertwined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Which is a great segue to the next question topic ish is sports specific. You started to kind of touch on it, you started to mention it, but I think it's important for us to talk about it because so many times people are like, oh, this is sports specific, or it has to look like the sport, or you and I have even had a in-depth conversation of like, oh, this person didn't want to do this because it didn't look like their sport. But does your weight room session need to look exactly like your sport, or what's the balance there that makes it important?
Yeah. So I think the whole sport specific thing, you could have a different definition of that than I do, right? When I think sport specific, I think kind of what I mentioned earlier. This player is a goalkeeper. They need to, for a set shape position, they have to be able to maintain good core balance to stay centered over their feet, right? They need to have good core engagement or pelvic stability to stay stacked at the rib cage and pelvis so that they're not falling really far forward with their chest or have their chest too high, right? You can speak more about like set shapes and keeping shape during like varying instances, I guess you could say, of what a goalkeeper's encountering in their session. And to me, that's like bringing it, what's going to make this goalkeeper stronger in those positions when I bring them into the gym. But another thing of sport specific, another definition might be, okay, well, a goalkeeper, I'm going to bring them into the gym and, again, correct me if I'm kind of going off the wrong path here, but I'm going to like throw tennis balls at them and make them do hand-eye coordination stuff like in the weight room when I could otherwise be making them, again, going back to those qualities, stronger, faster, or just being able to endure things for longer while they're playing their sport. So I think from the sport specific thing, it's kind of blown up too, because I think there's a lot of people kind of just, we all use social media as our resource. A lot of us do for like, we see the LeBrons, we see the, everybody of, anyone major sport, I guess you could say icon, we see what they're doing and we see what other people are doing. It's like, what can I do to get attention on social media, or what looks good for my content? And we're kind of in that losing the true intention of what we're trying to do. And we're not really putting, I guess, priority on, is this truly going to benefit this individual when they play their sport, right? Like, is there measurable things to say, well, we did this and it made them their vertical jump higher, so now they're able to cover more ground in the net. Or we did this, we increased our trap bar deadlift weight, right? And now I'm seeing this person really be able to stay strong through their shape through the different phases of goalkeeping. So sport specific from my standpoint is bringing a player into the gym and just finding those joint angles, finding the positions or movement patterns that they need to do, and then just like improving any aspect of the strength, speed, and endurance qualities that I can. Because I don't think there's ever been question of whether or not if you make someone stronger, faster, and able to endure, that it's going to make them bad at their sport.
Right. So would you call it more of a compliment? Like it's a compliment and then like an addition of maybe things you're missing?
Yeah, definitely. So like, not to mention kind of going back a little bit in those qualities of like being more mobile, having more stability, right? To stability of, again, we're talking about pelvis for, strength and stability at the pelvis is going to translate to maybe fewer groin injuries or quad injuries or pulls, fewer, right? We're not mitigating hamstring pulls. They're better able to load and push when they're low diving or high diving because they hold the shape and have the stability of the shape of that position to do so. So I think that something I kind of want to bring it up because I feel like you brought it up in the past, like the whole, you have a goalkeeper session and there's a goalkeeper coach working with a kid on a BOSU ball.
Perfect. You got it. This is my next question. It's like the same question, but like posed in a different way almost.
Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Goalkeeping, the gym, bring the gym to the goalkeeping, and like you hit on it. I see it on social media and I can't quite grasp it. So like, yeah, go ahead. Tell us. Is it something that is practical? Does it make sense? Because to me, it doesn't feel like it makes sense.
Yeah. I think that, again, people are doing these things. It's like, what can I do to challenge this individual? But it's not really representative of the environment that it should be occurring in, right? Our brains are really impressionable, right? We don't forget environments. We don't forget the environments that make us happy, that we were scared in. We don't forget the scape of an environment, like in terms.
Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more. Welcome back to another episode of the Keeper Institute podcast.
Getting
funky with it.
I'm just trying to encourage everybody to watch the podcast instead of just listen, because I also did a funky little thing.
She did a little dance. And Jill's one of the best dancers I know. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, then you're gonna want to watch the cat. Okay. Although I have been told I have a voice for podcasts. I think I've said this before on here, which makes me feel like when people say you have a face for radio, and I'm like,
right. Is that offensive?
I think I'm cute. So is this offensive?
I don't know.
All right. Without further ado, another topic that we are obviously excited about, because when are we not excited on this podcast?
True.
We're going to be talking about how TKI is bi-coastal and our trip to San Diego. It has been a few weeks since we've returned, but we have definitely done some self-reflection, and we have quite a bit of takeaways that we'd like to share with you guys.
Yeah, I think we should start by telling people why we decided to go to San Diego. So most of the listeners that tune in on a weekly basis or know TKI or know us know that my sister-in-law is Caitlin Sheridan. So all family events and meals are commandeered by football talk. And so are vacations now, apparently. Our family likes to vacation. We like to spend a lot of quality time together. A couple years ago, we were going on vacation to Fort Lauderdale before Dom and Kaylin went back to San Diego. And Kaylin said, hey, while we're on vacation, can you train me? And I was like, definitely. Why don't we make this a little bit bigger than just like me and you? So let's invite some friends. So we invited Aubrey Kingsbury and Katie Lund and Manny McGlynn, and it was great. We had such a positive experience down there, training 6-7 goalkeepers. And the next year we were thinking, well, how can we do that again, but a little bit better, and provide housing for players and transportation and meals. And so we moved it to San Diego, and we ran it in alignment with a youth camp so that we were able to serve the community and meet the needs of 150 goalkeepers plus over 2 days, which was fantastic. We redid it this year, and we had about 15 goalkeepers that we were training in our NWSL preseason camp, and we had such a phenomenal experience. We trained for Monday to Friday, and we got to know people outside the lines, inside the lines. We got to work with some of the most talented goalkeepers in the world and some of the next generation of really talented goalkeepers as well. And yeah, we wanted to share that experience with you guys and what our main takeaways were from our debrief.
Yeah, so, at TKI, we are firm believers of you can learn from anything and anywhere, and kind of everything that goes on in life can be a learning opportunity. And this is no different. So kind of takeaways that work for me at least, I'll let you speak on your own behalf, but from both running our youth camp there, but also getting an opportunity to work with some of these amazing women who are up and coming professionals / are already professionals competing in various leagues. Number one was session design. So we've talked and we've done podcasts on session design before, but I think a takeaway for us from San Diego is that session to design has to be intentional. What are you trying to get out of it? Especially you're talking, okay, maybe we're working with goalkeepers that we get 1 to 2 chances to work with a year. How can I make sure that I'm not overloading, but there's a theme and you're going to be able to know that theme, even if I was to never tell you at the end of the week or end of the day, end of the session?
Yeah, and I think for us going into this week of training, it was really intentional for us to design our sessions with principles of goalkeeping in mind. So we have our own principles in the way that we want to interpret the game. And I think that we are in a unique position that we get to work with day one goalkeepers to number one goalkeepers in the world and everywhere in between that spectrum. And so I think it's intentional for us to create a very broad experience for goalkeepers, for them to be able to interpret situations based on their own skill sets. And whether that leads to more awareness of this is my super strength, I'm going to play to that, or hey, I need some support with this. That's the aim that we have every single training. So for us, it's not about, I think if you break goalkeeping down into 3 segments, it would be positioning, it would be decision, and execution of whatever that decision may be. So let's say you're defending the goal, you're positioned to be able to cover as much of the goal as possible. Maybe it's hit to your right hand side, your decision to dive, and then the execution of that dive. And I think so often, especially in goalkeeper training, players only get an opportunity to work on the execution of things. And sometimes it has context and sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes it is completely devoid of anything that is rich in information like it would be in the game environment. So for us, we were very, very intentional of, okay, we're going to work on creating high value passes and we're going to work on the decision whether I'm going to be preventative or I'm going to be reactionary. So a bit more closer range 1v1s, not necessarily space defense, but hey, can I impact that ball or do I have to step back and react? And there's plenty of things. We could have worked on that topic for like a month long and never done the same thing twice. But it was really awesome experience because every question that goalkeepers had, we answered with the principles of goalkeeping. And it might be different, right? Like if you and I are training, it might be your answer might be different than my answer. And we want that. We want to bring awareness. Like that's our objective with every session, whether we're working with 8-year-olds or pros, is we want to bring awareness to something. And then that something could be yourself mentally, yourself physically, your team strategy, your opponent's strategy, whatever that might be. We want to bring some more awareness to that so that you feel like maybe you didn't nail it and the execution, but you understand maybe the decision a little bit better, or you understand the position a little bit better, or you're curious. You're curious about, hey, how else could I do this? Right? I've always been set in this cookie cutter mold of what it has to be, but like, what else could it be? Or what else could I be capable of? So I think going into the week, we were really mindful of here are our intended outcomes for the week, and here is what we hope. People might not execute it perfectly every time, but there's just some more curiosity and awareness around these decisions.
Yeah, and I think that something that's kind of important to highlight here too is like it's not like we're like these will be our sessions every single day and this is
Mm-hmm.
what it will look like and I will stick to it. There's honestly no rigid structure besides like I mean I guess we have our model of how we run training, so that could be a whole nother podcast, but we have an idea, we have principles, and we're gonna let things kind of play out. That way we can make almost like flexible decisions that are gonna best serve the people we're working with. So there's a plan, there's an agenda, there's a design, but there's also still room for flexibility. That way, if it's like, oh gosh, they're really not getting it, doesn't mean we're gonna break it down and be like, okay, let's do this really technical training. It just means like they need more support. So rather than move on to X that we had planned, we're going to stick with a little bit more of a progression or a regression to A so that they can kind of walk away with an understanding or get a chance to explore more of what we're trying to get out of today.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Tori, is like coaching isn't a hard, fast
Right.
thing that it's like 6 reps of this and they'll get it, or like 2 sets of 4,
Perfect.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's, I think that that's why coaching is so beautiful is like you have to use your gut too, and you have to observe. And I think if, as coaches, if we could put our focus on observing more and talking less, we probably would run a more effective session, right? Because if I'm observing that goalkeepers are having a struggle with touching into space, I can manipulate the exercise to get them to do that and explore it and try it without necessarily telling them to do it, right? And I think also one more point, I know you want to interject and that's great. One more point is like this is so important. And I tell goalkeepers this all the time is that you don't need a positive outcome to have learned something. You don't. Like, well, people will be like, well, their first touch is terrible. So why would I put pressure? And I'm like, well, why can't they learn within the context? And what does success look like in that training environment anyway? Maybe it's not to technically execute something perfectly with no context. To me, that's never the answer. Maybe it is to just you make it a little bit messy and let them explore taking touches, and whether it's too big or whether it's too small, there's a consequence to those actions and they start to adjust and self-organize on their own, like without having to necessarily take it put it out of context, isolate it, and then what? Relearn it back in context. That to me, that's just like a complete waste of time. So if we have two things, the ability to adjust based on what we see and adjusting our expectations of what the outcome could look like or what it should look like or what success looks like, I think we're going to be able to, one, enjoy our sessions more, but two, it's going to be more effective.
For sure. Um, as always, I'm just writing some notes. Got me thinking. But yeah, I mean, it's affordance. How are we creating opportunities that look like the game and allow you to manage in the game? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sometimes people need to know, like, you're a young goalkeeper, right? You're not locking your ankle when you kick the ball. Try locking your ankle. It could look like this. But
Mm-hmm.
why practice that 1,000 times uncontested when in the game it's not going to happen uncontested? Let's
Right.
give them those tips, tools, strategies, but let's still do it in our game realistic manner.
Well, I think that's the point, Tor, is like we don't want to create goalkeepers that all look the same.
No.
We don't want them to all look the same. We don't want to just work on the execution and drill into them. It has to be this way, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was a fantastic track runner, Michael Owens, I think. But whatever, he had like a hinge in his gait that's different than most people. And a coach tried to change it. And he wasn't as effective. He wasn't as fast. Like he was the fastest man in the world. And then they
Or
were
Jesse
thinking
Owens.
just one of them. No, I think I don't
Mike.
know. Whatever. It was a track
We're not
runner.
runners.
We're not runners. He was an Olympian. He was one of the fastest in the world. They wanted to change his gait, but it didn't work for him, right?
Right.
So we want to create an environment that where effective goalkeeping is really the outcome, like finding
Right.
the solutions, not just doing the solution over and over and over and over. So we look the same because that might not be effective for some people,
Right.
right?
You're going to
Setting the
take from them.
exact same way might not be the most effective way, and we could be doing more harm than good by forcing people to do something a certain way.
Absolutely. Which I think really well gives us a transition to point number two, communication. We had at our camp between 2 days, I don't know how much crossover there was, but probably somewhere around 100 goalkeepers, different goalkeepers, probably more that we got to work
More,
with.
yeah.
And we could not coach any of them the same, right? Like
Mhm.
they weren't going to learn what we were trying to teach or how we were trying to support them if I gave them all the same way to do the same thing. That's why it's here's our curriculum, let's run it the way you would, give feedback based on what you see. Not everyone's going to get the same feedback and allow them to explore. Now, take that same thing and all these amazing women that we got a chance to work with Monday through Friday, they are all some of the best in the world, some of the best at being goalkeepers. They play in leagues that require a lot of them, whether they're the one, two, or three. And we could not coach a single one of them the same. Therefore, our communication based on their knowledge, their skill set, their familiarity with certain jobs of a goalkeeper had to kind of be different. And I think it was on, the four of us being me, you, Kieran, and Maria to really make sure that we were investing in understanding who they are as players and kind of where they were at. That way we could kind of guide and communicate and collaborate with them in a way that was going to help them best see our intended outcome and get takeaways and questions from the week.
Mm. Yeah, communication is so important. Obviously, that stems from like a good relationship, which was hard because some of the people we never even met before our
Right.
first day of training. So that became more difficult. But I think sometimes too is that as coaches, we can communicate through our session design. And
Yep.
I think that's one of the more undervalued aspects of how to communicate is through a session design because you want to create an impetus for change, right? So instead of me telling you that you're out of position, there might be some resistance to that if I just say, hey, you're out of position. But if I score on you when you're out of position and exploit that weakness, I'm creating impetus for change where I might not have to say you're out of position, right? Just me consistently doing something to someone and exploiting them now creates a little more buy-in and I'm communicating, hey, through my actions, we need to make an adjustment here, right? And still, then if they aren't changing, then obviously you want to use your communication and leverage that maybe to, ask them to pair and share and talk about what they see or how they feel or what's been hard. You can kind of check for understanding to see if they even know that they're out of position at all. You can check for understanding of like, I did this because, and then you can get a little bit more to the root of the problem, right? But communication is so important, and I think there's more creative ways that we can use to communicate rather than just our words.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so that kind of leads me to a question for you. When you think about the fact that, we're training with some people that we've never met, whether we're talking the youth side or in that pro environment, how do you create that connection or figure out how you're going to best collaborate with them? Because
Mm,
not everyone's used to that. Like growing up, I went to a session and the session was ran and I was a participant.
hmm
So how do you kind of work with that as a coach?
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier for us, if I'm being honest, than maybe just the average coach listening to this potentially, because we have a reputation of really caring about people and supporting people and like being advocates for pushing the position forward. And, whether it's on social media or, a quick interaction with any of the coaches at TKI, I feel like people really know that and they get that and they feel safe with us. It's just who we are and the environment that we try to create. And we're very outwardly expressive and explicit about the environment we want to create. So I think it's a little bit easier, but there's so many different ways, like checking in with someone, Tegan Y, never met her before. We worked with her. Emmy Allen, never met her in person before we met her, worked with her. But like sending a text to be like, hey, really care about you and helping you get the most out of this week. So what can we support you with?
Mm,
Okay, yeah, here's just send me like two or three things. And you know what? I've had already watched their film, so I knew what we wanted to help them with, but like also giving them a voice and like
yeah,
agency in their narrative and like bringing, again, this is a way to bring attention is
right.
ask, okay, well, we're going to do that. We're absolutely going to work on service from the half space. And so you're going to have plenty of opportunities. And before you even get there, I want you to think about what are some of the hardest parts about that for you? And what are some questions that I can support you with more? Or doing our classroom session. That was like to me really fun because we could sit down and we can collaborate and actually have in-depth conversations where people were like, maybe feeling really comfortable to bring up some of the hesitancies in certain
Mm,
situations. And also, it afforded us an opportunity for everyone to say how they would have handled the situation and to see how different all of their answers and solutions were,
right.
which I thought was so beautiful. Like, just this abstract way of being able to solve problems that might suit your skill set better than someone else's. And I thought it was cool, really cool.
Yeah. I think communication is like one of those things that people are like always ready to talk about, always ready to like give you as a quick answer, our
Yeah.
goalkeepers included. But it is this thing that goes so much more in depth than we ever give it credit for. So I think a lot of those goalkeepers knew how much you cared because of those first steps that you took. Like, what are you looking for out of this week? Like, where do you need help? Like, taking the time so that you watched and then could express that in your session design in itself helps with that as well. Now, talk to me about feedback. Like, without knowing a goalkeeper and how they learn best, like, you work with Kaylin all the time, right? You
hmm
know, maybe when she's at her edge of like, she can't take any more feedback today, or when she's maybe like, ooh, she's going to be looking for maybe some support on that. Without
hmm
knowing someone or working with a different group, a different training environment, trying to set that tone, what do you do to create that? How can you kind of manage that as a coach, you think?
That's a really good question. I think so. And I think back about last off season, right? We had never worked with Casey Murphy. It was like her first time coming here. And so in the beginning, like I had watched her games and knew where we could really support her and like some areas for growth. But I wasn't like hard in on it with her. I wasn't like, you need to get better at this.
Right.
And like, if you want to be on the national team, like, this is what you have to do. It was like, hey, let's train. Let's train a couple times and maybe give you a couple little things here. Like, well, let's open the width of your feet just a little bit and see what happens. I love to use that language. I'm curious if you tried this, what would happen? I'm
Yeah.
curious if you explored the width of your feet, how that could benefit you. I'm
Right.
I think that I think that there's a little bit of a different way you can interpret this, right? Just a lot of questioning rather than you need to do it this way,
Right.
right? A lot of questioning. And then this is silly, but like when someone else, like let's say Morgan Messner, right? Morgan's been with us in forever.
Yeah.
And I know I can give her feedback explicitly in a group and that it wouldn't be a shot to her ego or pride, right? I know I can say, Morgan, maybe your timing is off or whatever.
Right.
And I can give her a more explicit feedback where I know that the goalkeeper that's new is listening to that information. And
Mm,
then they're like, oh, well, maybe I could do that, right?
right.
And so sometimes it's just managing like how much you support that new person in the beginning and check in with them. Like I really like to ask people, how do you feel right now? How do you feel right now? That gives me a lot of insight on like what's your mental talk looking like? Do you want to light me on fire? Because if that's the case, you want to light me on fire, you're in flight, flight, or freeze. Like you're not hearing any of my feedback anyway. You're not picking up on any of that information. You just want to get out of there as quick as possible. You want to fight me, or you're just gonna like get stiff and not make any choice, right? So we want to try to regulate that by asking like, hey, how you feeling right now? Great. Take some deep breaths. I'm right here with you and it's going to be okay. We're going to work on it and you're getting better. You just don't see the final outcome right now, right?
Right.
Just really and not doing that obviously in a group of everyone, but sometimes I mean when everyone is comfortable, I could say that to people, right? Or describe how you feel in one word. Like when people are getting water, I can just come up to someone and be like, hey, are you doing okay right now? You're doing great. Here's some positive thing that happened and here's where we're going to keep trying to explore this, right?
Yeah.
Or I was just in with the national team and we were doing a session with the futures and the head goalkeeper coach was asking them to do something really different with their end line service positioning. And I said, hey, can I make a point real quick before we start this? And he was like, yeah, of course. And I said, hey, you guys, I know this is really different than anything you've ever learned before. And it's going to be really hard. But I want you guys to try and be open to it and see what happens and just see what happens. And if it doesn't, come off right away, we can explore something different, right? But this is going to be hard, and going into it, it's going to be hard for everybody, right? So just kind of like setting the scene of like what the expectation is, right? We don't expect you to be perfect. We want you to try and explore something new and different, and it could be hard in the beginning.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I love it. Well, we got to go on to number 3.
All
Okay. Now
right,
we talk about communication.
we really could, Tor.
Communicate. But number 3, I think it's important for the players, but we took this away for ourselves. Like if you're a coach out there and you're a career coach, especially, or you're a goalkeeper coach, like our physical demands are quite high. You're essentially trying to be an attacker for hour and a half, 2 hours, however long your session may be that day,
Hmm.
and those weeks leading up to it. But recovery is so important. I was like, I don't always warm. Sorry, Leah, we just had you on a podcast recently, but I don't always warm up before I coach. I never cool down after. Um,
Right.
and I like to think I take pretty good care of my body, but like I'm not doing what I should. Like these professional women are probably going home and doing their post workout stuff. They're getting Normatex, they're getting treatment. Like as a coach, I think a lot of times we think that's for the athlete, but if our job is this and this is our career, we have to almost be treating ourselves like an
Yeah.
athlete.
Yeah. Um, I think we individually took that away, and then when we convened, we were both said at the same time, like, we need to recover like we're pro athletes again. Like it is like we're getting a little older, our body's taking a little bit longer to bounce back, and our sessions tour that we run here are unforgiving for us. The other day, I saw my watch and I had run 11 and a half miles in the day from training, 2 sessions. That's it, 2 sessions. Granted, I was on the field for like 3 or 4 hours, but still it was a really long day of us putting pressure on goalkeepers, getting them to solve that pressure, a lot of running with 1v1s, a lot of running to collect balls. It was just a lot, right? 11 and a
Right.
half miles. Like that's more than I think a field player would run in a game. Like, so just imagine like how a field player would feel in a game running that intense of a match and then what they would do the day after or after the game. Like we need to recover like that. Especially because I'm pushing 40 these days.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
and like the quality of our session depends on our equipment, of course, from West Coast, but also the health of our bodies, right? The
For
health of our
sure.
bodies. I mean, if my body is decrepit and my knees bothering me and my ankles all busted up, I'm not going to be able to run as fast as I possibly could to get pressure on them or just have the freedom to move and strike and hit the ball as literally as hard as I can from outside the box. Like that is
Mhm.
fatiguing. And we
Yep.
want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves so we can better serve the people that we get to work with.
Yeah, and it could be low barrier to entry. Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but even just something as simple as taking 2 to 3 minutes to be like, okay, I'm gonna warm up before so my hip flexors don't feel like they're ripping when I hit
Right.
my first 5 shots. And
Right.
then maybe like after the fact, being like, all right, I'm gonna be intentional about cooling down. I'm not just gonna get in my car and drive home, whether it be series of mobility or stretches, something along those lines. And then, both of us already are people who like working out we enjoy to do, so that's already in there. But like not just doing the conditioning, doing the workouts, but making sure that there's days for rest. And I'm not
Yeah.
good about rest. I don't know how you feel about rest, but I like to be active. So sometimes
Yeah.
a day off wasn't happening. So now I've learned, okay, I need to take at least a day off where I'm like, 100 steps, maybe that day, something along those lines.
I just said that to Leah the other day. She's like, "Did you take time off to let your knee heal?" I said, "Yeah, I did like an under 4,000 step day. It's fine." But no, and I just want to share something for anybody who's listening. The low hanging fruit, obviously, is what we want to do first, right? And you shared something with me the other day that I haven't felt better from. But you were sharing your morning routine and you were saying that you had delayed coffee for a while in the mornings. And I was like, ugh, I've been really not wanting to hear this because I hear everyone talking about delaying coffee, delay coffee. And I just been not wanting to do it because I just love my coffee. But I do still get to enjoy my coffee, but it's just now instead when I wake up, instead of drinking coffee and continuing to exacerbate my dehydration, I'm drinking 30 ounces of water while I'm walking, getting some motion, and then getting in the sauna for 15 minutes, which by the time I get to my coffee, it's 2 hours later. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even really need coffee. I don't think I feel really good right now.
Oh,
And
that's
that was
lovely.
something, yeah, like something so small that really changed my energy levels or my outlook. And at some point, we'll probably change the morning routine, but for right now, it feels really good.
Yep. And it's the little things, it's little changes, not
Yeah.
all at once. We have hit our quota we got for today. It's those three things. So just a reminder, session design, communication,
Hmm.
recovery, no matter if you're a player or a coach. I had a blast in San Diego. I always feel so beyond grateful that you guys include me in things like that, from the youth camp to getting the experience to train all those incredible professionals. It's always a blast and it's always a learning experience and something that I hope we get to continue for a very long time.
And the coffee is good there, and the weather is good.
And the
This year, the
donut.
weather was good. I one more thing. To everybody listening, I just want to say thank you so much for always tuning in. Thanks for listening to Tori and I have these like long conversations just about goalkeeping in life. And it's like one of my favorite things to do is just to have conversations with you. You spark so much joy in me and so many great ideas. And like I wouldn't be who I am without you, Tor. But um
Oh, don't make me cry. They'll have to watch to see.
I also just want to let everybody know that we have a very good itinerary of podcasts coming up. I feel really good about, super passionate about like some in-depth stuff. We're going to start adding some more videos. We're going to try
Yeah.
some more tech stuff. But also, anytime you guys have any feedback, we want to hear it, whether it's good or whether it's bad. We want to hear it because we really want to serve you. And that is why we do this podcast. We want to support your development as a more well-rounded goalkeeper and a person so that you can be the most confident goalkeeper you can be and you can enjoy the sport that we love so much, even though it's hard and there's so many adversities and obstacles that get in the way. We want to just remind you guys that we're here to support you. So thank you for tuning in. Keep tuning in and send us your feedback if you have it. And until then, we'll catch you later.
We'll catch you later.